If you or someone that you know is suffering with vitiligo, a whitening of the skin and a loss of that pigmentation, this video is for you. I'm going to share 7 natural tips for vitiligo, and the great thing is that these actually work. Okay, tip number 1, you got to look at your gut microbiome and fix something called your leaky gut. Now, what does this mean? That means that those tight junctions in the gut have opened up, and now this is part of your autoimmunity, and that is why part of your repigmentation with your melanin levels is suffering, because it started in the gut. And this is so common, having that leaky gut with so many different autoimmune conditions. So it's something that you definitely want to do your best. I've got other videos how to fix that gut ecology, your microbiome, and fixing those tight junctions in the gut. That's going to be really important for your vitiligo. Okay, tip number 2 is to minimize your blue light exposure. Well, what does that mean? That means all of your screen time, artificial lights in your environment, especially at night, is going to be very disruptive to your circadian biology, your circadian rhythms, and we have light sensors in our skin and in our eyes. And when we offset the natural timing of our lighting, and we're getting too much of that blue light from the artificial light in our environment, that will offset our proper biology in terms of how we relate to our outside world. And that can then have an impact on your melanin, because we know that our melanin in our skin, of course, is stimulated by natural sunlight, full spectrum light, which is very different from the light that we most times have indoors. So managing your blue light toxicity is going to be really important for healing your vitiligo. Number 3 on my list, another tip, is to minimize your EMF exposure. Now, we know that EMFs are very dehydrating to our skin, to our cellular function, to our mitochondrial health as well. And our mitochondria have a lot to do with this whole connection with our melanin and our exposure to the outside world. And having those non-native or unnatural EMFs in our environment from our Wi-Fi, from our cell phone towers, from basically anything that is plugged in our vicinity, can be giving off this low frequency EMF, these electromagnetic fields, which can be very compromising to our melanin and what's happening with our overall physiology. So I've got other videos again on limiting and how to limit your EMF exposure. You've got to check those out. Okay, tip number 4 for vitiligo, of course, is to get more natural sunlight exposure. That goes without saying, because we know that full spectrum light is what stimulates our melanocytes to be able to make that pigment in our skin, our melanin, and without having that natural sunlight exposure at different times throughout the day. So ideally we would spend our lives outdoors, and then nobody would have vitiligo, but of course we don't do that. We live our lives indoors under artificial light, and herein lies the problem. So at least making efforts to get outside, early morning sunlight exposure as the sun is rising, the opportune time to get some natural sunlight on your skin and in your eyes. Midday, we need some of that UV as well. And of course, as the sun is setting, very healing rays from the sun. Also with the red, the near infrared and the infrared rays, very healing and stimulating to our healthy skin ecology. Okay, tip number 5 for vitiligo is to make sure we're getting enough vitamin D. So of course, this is natural sunlight exposure. However, in some countries, what they do is they actually apply vitamin D serum to the skin and then have you go out into the sun. And this is something that can repigment the skin. Now, in another study for vitiligo, they found that climatotherapy, which is going and bathing in the Dead Sea, which we know is loaded with minerals and iodine, and then sitting out in the sun, helped to repigment the skin. So here you can see 50% repigmentation in more than 50% of the lesions happened for 3.9% of the patients that were in the study. And 81.4% actually showed good repigmentation. So another topical treatment that they use in some countries is a topical iodine solution, and then going out into natural sunlight exposure and getting a bit of that UV on the skin to help to repigment the skin, to turn those white spots back into melanin-rich skin. Okay, now tip number 6 is to increase your copper level. So often a copper deficiency is also implicated in developing whiter spots or that vitiligo on the skin. So this can also lead to whiter hair, a loss of melanin in the hair, and premature graying of the hair. So actively making sure that you're getting enough copper in your diet, as well as other trace minerals, is going to be really important here. One of the best sources, of course, of these minerals is seafood. So shellfish and things like oysters have copper, as well as the other important minerals to help for our overall cellular health. And number 7 on my list for vitiligo is to optimize your iodine levels. So especially if you come in contact with chlorine, which is a halogen, as well as fluoride. So I want you to think about this. So in terms of chlorine, maybe you swim in a chlorinated pool, maybe you drink tap water that has chlorine, maybe you use bleach in your home. These are all exposures now to chlorine, which is going to displace your iodine, and that can have an effect on your cellular metabolism, especially for your skin, but your thyroid as well. In terms of fluoride toxicity, you don't have to have a lot to have a fluoride toxicity. So whether that's in your toothpaste, it could be in your mouthwash, it could be in fluoride treatments that you have at your dentist's office, it could even be in your drinking water, depending on where you live. You really have to be mindful of your fluoride exposure. A lot of medications also have fluoride in them as well, so definitely check the labels of your meds, because that could be displacing your iodine and your other important minerals, and now even contributing to your vitiligo. What have you tried for your vitiligo? I'd like to know. Please put it in the comment section. And I did mention that EMF exposure and why this is so important to decrease our exposure, especially to man-made EMFs, those electromagnetic fields. I want you to check out my other video, 10 tips to drastically reduce EMF exposure. It's an important one. I'll see you there.